Hi everybody, my name's Alex Lennon, and here I'm going to try and do a run through of how we install the Hubs Foundation Hubs Community Edition. So I'm fairly new to all this VR stuff. My background is embedded systems, but I've been asked to take a look at how we can get the Hubs Community Edition installed on a system so that friends of mine and colleagues, we can take a look at it and what's going on with it in the VR space. So I don't know a lot of the history, but my understanding is that Mozilla created and ran Mozilla Hubs. This was then sort of end-of-lifed and shut down and has been open sourced and now taken over and is being managed and maintained by the Hubs Foundation. So there are some instructions, quite a lot of instructions around and about on the interwebs about how you get this installed. A lot of that seems to be either on DigitalOcean or AWS using Kubernetes. I don't particularly want to do that. I think what I want to do really is to install it on my own hardware box, and then we can put that into the makerspace, hackspace that I work out of, does Liverpool. And we can have a play with it and see what we can do. So I've spent a fair bit of time trying to understand how to do this and hopefully made some progress. And hopefully I can try to help you to get through this too. Now, what we're going to be doing is installing Ubuntu, the Linux Ubuntu operating system, onto an Intel hardware box that I have here. I'll put some details about the hardware in the link that goes with the video. It's a minikube box, I think they call it, but you'll see some of the details on this later. And then on top of that, we're going to install Kubernetes for orchestration of the various containers that are needed to install Hubs-CE. And then we're going to go through and get that set up, which is going to involve some configuration and is going to involve generating some web server SSL certs using Let's Encrypt, and we'll see how it goes. Yeah, great. I will be going through this in real time, so there will undoubtedly be a lot of mistakes that I make, and I'll do some editing at the end of this to try to remove all the particularly boring bits so that you don't have to sit there for hours. Then the intention is to extract the meat from what we get through here into some form of document that's easier to read through rather than having to sit and listen to me for those who don't enjoy sitting and watching videos. So okay, off we go. We're looking at the Hubs Foundation page here. This is your starting point. They're beavering away, creating some documents on how to do all of this, and hopefully this is gonna feed into those documents. Again, a lot of this is focused on doing this stuff within cloud systems from DigitalOcean, AWS. There's some stuff on Google and elsewhere. But we're going to be doing this a slightly different way. So the first thing that we need to do is to go and grab a copy of current Ubuntu, and I'm going to create a USB stick, and then we're going to blow that or write that Ubuntu image onto the internal drive of the board that of the box that I have here. Apologies, I'm sort of typing as I'm thinking, and it doesn't really work very well. So let's try and download Ubuntu. We will download, I think we'll download the Ubuntu desktop this time. Why not? Here you go. Ubuntu LTS. We're going to download 24.04, which I think is the latest and is a long-term support release, and it's downloading, so it's going to take a little while, 8 minutes or so. So what we'll do is we will pause the video for a little bit, and we'll come back when that's downloaded. Okay, so that's now downloaded. We've got an ISO file. And you can see that I've loaded this Make Startup Disk tool. I'm not going to run through all of this in detail because all of this information is sort of easily accessible. If you Google for creating a bootable USB stick on Ubuntu, it will get you to the instructions for this. I'm going to find the file that I've just downloaded, if I can. Let's see what we've got. There's the 24.04 ISO, which you're now using. Down at the bottom you can see Kingston USB stick. That's got an older Ubuntu 22.04 on. Don't need to worry about that. I'm just going to kick that off now and write this disk image to the USB stick. You can't see the progress bar on the window here, but it is indeed writing. Again, that's going to take a little while, so while that happens, I'm going to pause this so that you don't have to sit through what I have to sit through. I'll be back in a sec. So that took a while. The USB stick is now written with the Ubuntu image, and what I'm going to do is move that over into the USB socket on the board that we're going to install onto. Now, what I've got is I've got a video capture board here, which is with a bit of luck going to capture the output from the system that we're going to install onto, so that you can see what's going on. I'm getting into the BIOS. There we go. And what we're doing here is we're just trying to boot from the USB stick instead of the onboard drive. You see here there's a 512 gigabyte SSD in there, but what we're going to do is to boot from the Kingston device. So let's do that. And now what will happen is we're now booting from the USB stick to install Ubuntu. And again, you know, this process of installing Ubuntu is really standard, so you don't need to worry too much about following the detail here. But what we will do is just emphasize a couple of points. The user I will create, I'm going to call Ubuntu user, and we'll put a simple password in, and then off we go. So while that's carrying on, I'm just going to pause here, continue in a sec. So we're booting up the installation. It's taking a while actually, I'm not sure, it's quite so slow, but what you see is it's preparing to install Ubuntu, and then we're going to go through the usual steps. We're installing in English, and accessibility, etc. We're going to make it UK English because that's where I'm based. We're going to connect to my local Wi-Fi network here. So I shall just enter the password for that. There we go. And we're on to the local Wi-Fi network. I don't think we'll worry about in replacing the installer. We're going to install Ubuntu. We'll do an interactive installation. I think we'll use the default selection. We'll allow to support third-party graphics and media formats. And off we go. You know what, I'm just going to erase the disk. There's a previous installation, but that's what we're going to get rid of. And we'll just do a basic installation. And I'm going to create an Ubuntu user. And I'm going to give it a password. And confirm that password. And again, off we go. London time zone. Review your choices. and kick off the installation. So that's copying the files over. Let's see what's happening. Okay, now we're just going to wait for that to install now. Our Ubuntu 24.04 is now installed, so that's great. What we will do is we'll restart. I'll use the right mouse here, there we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break into the BIOS again. I'm going to remove the installation medium. You see it telling me to do that there. That's the USB stick that we've just installed from. And press enter to do that. Actually, I would go into the BIOS. I think what will have happened is that it will have set itself up to boot from the internal drive that it's installed to now. So let's see if that happens. Seems to be happening. And what we should see is our Ubuntu login screen come up. And then I'm going to do a little bit more setup here, which again is not core to what we need to do to install Hub CE. But I tend to prefer working via terminals and using SSH to remote into systems. And that's going to make it easier for me to go through the next steps with this. So we're going to set that up as well. So here we go. I'm going to log in as Ubuntu user with the password if I can remember it. And there we go, there's a desktop coming up. Welcome to Ubuntu. There are various bits and pieces that we can sign up to, but I'm not going to worry about those particularly. The next button is obscured a little bit here, but let's go through that. We're going to skip enabling Ubuntu Pro. And what we do is just trying to get through this button. You see, I don't know, will we share data with them? Why not? Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, all done. Right, so now let's bring up a terminal. What I like to do is whenever I've installed an OS image, I like to make sure it's up to date, and the way that we do that is with sudo apt update, type in our password. It's making sure it's got all the latest and greatest, and then we do sudo apt upgrade, and that's just going to install all those various bits and pieces. It's telling me, do you want to do that? But we're already doing that, so we're gonna ignore that message, and we're doing installation. There's a couple of tools I quite like to use. I mean, the Ubuntu or Debian apt package manager is fine, but I quite like a graphical client that I use in the console called Aptitude. So we're going to install Aptitude. And then it's generally, I find, useful to install a package called Build Essential, which has got various bits and pieces for compiling, and also the ubiquitous Git, so that we can check out repositories, which we're going to need to in the coming session. So that's nearly done now. That's just creating a new boot drive, doing some final setup. There we go, nearly there. Good. So I'm going to do sudo apt install aptitude. Just to show you what that looks like. There you go. It's a sort of graphical console, and you can search, same as a command line, but you can search for packages more easily. So we're going to have a look for Git. It's in there somewhere. Don't actually know where that would sit. Let's do it by the command line then. So if we exit out of aptitude, sudo apt install build essential and Git. So that's going to install various bits and pieces that are quite useful to have lying around. there you go. That's pretty much it. So that's Ubuntu installed now. What I'm going to do is look at the IP addresses. So we've got I've got a wired connection here, and my wireless connection should be around and about somewhere. Yeah, wired connection's got an IP address ending in 76 there. So what we're going to do is we're going to move away from using the screen capture from the actual device here, and we're going to SSH in from a terminal to continue our setup and installation. So bear with me. Now we've moved back over to the my local terminal on my system, and what I'm going to do is to SSH in as the Ubuntu user to that IP address, if I can remember it. I think it was 76, maybe it was 72. Okay, so we need to do something else here. What I forgot to mention is that for us to be able to SSH into this box, we need to install OpenSSH server, which we're going to do, and that should be up and running now. And if we go back over to my local terminal, here we go. We should be able to SSH into the board. There we go. I've used previous installation on this board, so it's just complaining about the keys having changed. SSH into it. Are you sure this is the board you want? Yes, it is. Very good. And so now we're into that board that that we've just installed, and now we're going to get on with the process of trying to install Hubs Community Edition. So if I just turn off that terminal briefly so that we can see what we're doing here. Go to the documentation. Getting started with Hubs, setting up your Hubs for the fundamentals. What we'll do is we'll go to some installation that I found for Hubs Community Edition. There we go, on GitHub. There's all sorts of documentation here on how to do this. And I would start here. I would start with the GitHub repo, Hubs Foundation, Hubs Community Edition. And what we need to be doing is to be working through these steps of Git cloning, doing some npm installation. We may need to install node and npm to be able to do that. We're going to kick off Kubernetes. We're going to install some Kubernetes support. We're going to generate some certificates, and then off we go. And we will see how far we get with that. Okay, very good. So first thing, let's show you the terminal again so that you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to be looking at that Community Edition screen behind the terminal, but the terminal should stay in the front for you. And the first thing I'm going to do is to git clone Hubs Foundation, Hubs Cloud. There we go. Grab that. In we go. I'm just using the latest and greatest for that. Change into the Hubs Cloud Community Edition directory, and we spend most of our time in here trying to do this setup. The next thing to do is install the node dependencies with the npm command. I think that's probably going to fail, and indeed it has failed because I don't have npm here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use apt again. I'm going to install Node.js. So there you go. So now I've got Node version 18. and I'm going to try and install npm. I tend to do it a different way, but we'll just try and keep it simple, and we'll do it this way. So that's pulling in loads of dependencies for Node. While it's doing that, I will have a sip of my coffee. So far, so good. Lots going on. Very good. So we should have npm now, and we do. So the next thing to do is to install dependencies or modules with Node npm ci. So let's let that do that. That has worked. And then the next bit in the instructions is we need to look at some port pass-through. Now, we don't really care about that here, but what I've found is that you might need to uninstall something called iptables persistent. This may well not be on this image, but it most definitely is on some of the images I've used on cloud servers, and particularly Oracle. It took me ages to figure out that I needed to remove that. So if by any chance you're working with a cloud box, particularly if you're using the Oracle cloud, you need to remove iptables persistent, because you won't be able to connect and you won't know why. So the next thing is it tells us, if we go back to, I will just turn off the terminal so you can see, deployed to Kubernetes, there is an import values.yaml file, and in that we want to set up our domain, some emails, SMTP server, and so on and so forth. What's going on here is that when you try to add users to Hub CE, it's designed to be really straightforward. So it says enter your email address, and it emails you an email link, and then you get in. There's a way to bypass that, but we want to be doing that because it gets a bit complicated if we don't do that. Another really critical thing that I found as I was sort of investigating was this admin email is actually what it sounds like. It is the administrator's email address. So I was using sort of a default admin email that I tend to use, and I was logging in with a different email, and I didn't have admin rights, and I couldn't work out how to get admin rights with Hub's Community Edition. And that's because it expects you to log in with your admin email to have your admin rights, at which point you can make other users admins and do whatever you want. But that was a little gotcha that it took me a little while to understand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on that terminal again so you can see, and we're going to have a look at that. We are going to load up input values.yaml. I'm going to use a domain of hubs.dynamicdevices.co.uk. I'm going to use my email, and I'm going to leave all this stuff as it is. Now this gets a bit funky, this next bit. You need to support an email server. I use Gmail for a lot of this, and I happen to know that this is how you set up a Gmail email server. And we have my user, and we have my password. Now, for Gmail, again, you can find all of this elsewhere, but for Gmail, there's a way of, if you're using two-factor authentication and so on and so on, it all gets a bit complicated. What you need to do is to create an application password with Gmail, and that will then let your SMTP client connect into Gmail to send emails for you. Again, setting up and accessing an email account with an email service provider is outside of the scope of this. Pretty standard thing to do. There is one thing we have to do with Gmail, which has been causing a lot of people trouble, I think. There are a lot of people talking about this. And what it is that there are different ways of connecting to send emails to an email server. You can use TLS, transaction level securities, I don't know, it's crypto, keeps things secure, or you can use SSL. And these are different ways of connecting, and there are different standard ports for them. Gmail expects you to use application passwords with its SSL port, which is 465. By default, Hub CE seems not to do that. It seems to be expecting to use TLS. And I had to make a couple of configuration changes to get that going. It took a little while to figure out, but I'm going to show you how to do this. So again, if I turn off the terminal and I go into my Gmail setup here, if you Google for Gmail app passwords, you'll find a page and it says, how do you create and manage app passwords? We're going to go in and do that. I'm going to enter my password for Gmail. There we go. Oops, wrong one. No, that's not the one we want. We want this one. So let's do that. Thank you very much. And now we are going in app password. You see, you need to create a new app password. I'm going to create one for the hub. There you go. For those of you who are now shouting at me about how incredibly stupid I'm showing you my security passwords, have no fear. Before you see this, this is going to have been deleted. So what I do is I copy that. Another little trick that you need to know is that when you put this application password into your configuration file, like so, you need to remove the spaces. There you go. So that's done. And now we've got a node cookie and a guardian key and a PHX key. And for some reason, we just need to create random values for these things. So I'm going to create some random values. I'm not at all convinced that we can handle symbols in these YAML files. So let's just do a sort of 16 alphanumeric type of thing in here. We're going to put that in change me. We're going to do it again. And we're going to do it again. Yeah, there we go. And those are all in there now. So that's fine. The next bit is you can add in a sketch fab and a tenor API key. I haven't done that. Not entirely sure what all that's about. I think Sketchfab key gives you access to browse through models that you can then import into your rooms. I think tenor is for GIFs, and you can pull in GIFs. So I'll probably get around to doing that at some point, but we don't need to do that for what we are trying to achieve today. So we're not going to. So that now is essentially set up. You don't need to change any of these other values. That's our input YAML file. And if we go back to our Hub's community instructions, it says now that we've done that, you see it talks a little bit about Sketchfab. Now we need to run npm run gen-ssl. And what that's going to do for us is to take that basic set of input values, and it's then going to turn that into an HCCE YAML file that we're going to use to drive our Kubernetes deployment. And if you look at that, you can see that's taken a load of my setup that I've put in here, and it's then created a fairly complicated Hub's deployment configuration. I think it probably is. And then in here, the thing that I had to do in terms of email was, you can see there's an elixir.ret.mailer. and that takes the input values that we've just set up before. And what I'm going to do is set TLS is false and SSL is true. And with a bit of luck, that will then get the Gmail going for emails. Really, what we probably want to look at in future is making this the configuration options into the input YAML. But again, that's for another time. We're just trying to get this stuff going. So that is our our file that's going to drive the Kubernetes deployment. And so next, we're going to actually look at installing Kubernetes support and doing that. For now, I have to go and do something else, and I shall return shortly. Right then, so continuing on, we've just set up our hcce.yaml file with the values that we need. And we're going to go back to looking at the instructions for Hubs Cloud. And next thing it says to do is npm run apply. Now, before we go on and do all this, what we need to do is to get our Kubernetes setup going. Now, I know very little about Kubernetes, but there seem to be a number of different options in terms of installing local sort of Kubernetes cluster support. And I've been through a few of them. I've tried K3s. I had some trouble with that. I'm not sure why, but there seemed to be some kind of conflict between ports that it was trying to expose, because it's running a bunch of these containers which are pods, and there are ports being mapped through, and there's HA proxying connections, and there's a load balancer. So there's quite a few moving parts, I would say. And so what I have done is to arrive at the point where we can install minikube. So let's do that. Install minikube Ubuntu, if I can remember how to do this. Okie dokie. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. So I'm running Linux, I'm x86-64. I want the stable stuff. I could we should use the Debian package. I think we use a binary download here, so it's telling me to use curl and then to do sudo install of what I grab. So let's do that and see if we can make it work. So grab the file, which doesn't work because we need to apt install curl, which we are doing. And let's try that again. That's downloading minikube. And then let's try to install that. So let's run that second step. And with a bit of luck, that's worked. So let's see if we've got minikube. And we do have minikube. That's great. Okay, so now we've got the beginnings of being able to support Kubernetes clusters, deployments, whatever we want to call them. Next thing you do with minikube, just have a quick sort of look through the rest of this document. There you are, is we're going to do minikube start. And then there's installation of kube control. And then we're going to use kube control as we move forward. There's another little tip here. This is telling us that when we've installed the kube control support within minikube, that we add a bash or a shell alias so that we can type kube control instead of typing minikube kube control. Now that's fine, but it doesn't work with the scripting that we're going to be using within Hubs Community Edition. Luckily for me, what does work is if we create a symlink called kube control through to minikube, and it sort of magically works out what you want to do. So that's what we're going to do. And what I will do is to turn the terminal back on for you. Here you go. And we're going to run minikube start. That starts minikube running in the background. Oh, right, I forgot about this bit. So the next thing is that minikube sits on top of container management, and you seem to have a lot of different options for doing container management. And I tend to prefer Docker because that's where I come from, and I'm reasonably au fait with Docker. So what we can do is we can go back and we can install Docker, and we will come on and do that in just 1 second. And let's go to install Docker on Ubuntu. And it talks about uninstalling older versions that we don't need to worry about, installation methods. I think I quite like the idea of using the apt repo again here. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up Docker's apt repository for use within Ubuntu, install the packages, run a Hello World app to check everything is working. There's a critical piece here, which is that we need to do Linux post install, and we need to make sure that the Docker or our current user, which as you recall is Ubuntu, is added to the Docker group, which allows us to use Docker as a non-root user. So that's what we'll do. I will bring up the terminal again, and we will go and grab that, set up the apt repository code, put our password in, and that has it's working through that. We should then be able to install the latest packages, and indeed that's working. And then what we'll do is we'll just run sudo docker run hello world. So that is running, that's going to run the hello world example as the root user. So let's try that. That's just grabbing the image, and that's run hello from Docker. And then finally, the last bit that we need to do is this Linux post install that I was talking about. And we've already, there's a sudo group add Docker to create the Docker group. That should exist already, which it does. And then there's a sudo user mod, which adds our current user to the Docker group. And that's done now too. Need to remember that you need to log out and log back in for that to take effect. So I'm going to exit the SSH session that I had. So I'm back on the local computer now. And then I'm going to SSH back in. And now we've got Docker up and running. Docker PS shows you Docker containers that are running, and we have non-running. So that's all to the good. So now if we go back and we try to run a minikube. So minikube start. And that's happier now. So that's telling us, yep, it's found that we've got Docker installed, and it's now doing a set of magic things that I don't understand to install the Kubernetes environment that it needs to have in place. So that's about 5% of the way through. So I think what I'll do is I will pause this again, and we'll come back when that's up and running. There we go. So that's minikube up and running now. And the next thing we need to do is to get this kube control going. And so what we'll do is we will go have a look at where that was. So we've done our minikube start, and we're now going to do this this kube control get po line. And let's bring the terminal back up so that you can see. Let's put that in. Okay, so here we go. It's not happy about us not having kube control. So what we can do for now is run minikube kube control. It doesn't like the shorthand flag. Well, that's new. Aha! I think maybe we need the 2 minuses. As you can see, there's quite a lot of experimentation and investigation that I've had to do here to get this going. So what you can see is we've got minikube, cube control, minus minus, get po minus a to get presumably the support for cube control. Now I think cube control still isn't found. And again, that's because it's expecting us within minikube to run minikube cube control. There you go. So that's minikube cube control. And as you can see, I was saying, this is quite important. I was saying, if you look at the aliasing here, alias cube control, etc., etc. So and you see there's a minus minus in there, which is what gave me the hint. Now that's not ideal. That doesn't work as far as I can see with what we need to do with Hub CE. So we're going to do something slightly different. And this is from my time playing with BusyBox, actually, in the embedded space. The applications can know the name by which they're called and respond appropriately. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but have a look at what I'm going to do here. I'm going to have a look at where minikube is in the installation. It's in user local bin minikube. And I'm going to sudo link to user local bin minikube from user local bin cube control. Let me just get the password in there. And that's done. So now if we type cube control, I can spell it correctly, that runs up. So that's nice. So we've now got cube control. Again, I'm very much a noob in the world of Kubernetes. There are no doubt much better ways of doing these things, but I'm just sort of trying to get through this as best I can. And what I can do is I can do cube control, get pods, which tells me what pods have been deployed, which I think are kind of like Docker containers. And there's other things that I can do as well with that command. So if you know Kubernetes, if you know cube control, you're now in a place where you can get going with that. Now, there's a couple of things as well here. So minikube doesn't start up by default. And I want it starting by default because I want to be able to run cube control. Cube control won't work without minikube up and running. And I want the system to come up. So what we're going to do is we're going to leverage systemd to add a service to run up minikube. I will have to kind of pull out these details somewhere in some kind of document form, but just sort of bear with me as I create a simple service from a template that I've got. So I'm gonna, do I have Nano? I do have Nano. So I'm gonna run an editor and I'm gonna create a file in etc systemd system minikube.service. And in the best traditions, here is one that I made earlier. Just taken this service off the previous installation that I did. And it's if you know systemd, it's very standard. If you don't really need to worry about it. In essence, this runs up at the right point in time on boot, which is after the Docker service starts, and then it runs minikube start, which is what we did on the command line. And we are going to install that. There's another service we're not going to worry about just yet. We'll come on to that later. So I'm going to write that. And then I'm going to have to do, we could reboot at this point if you wanted, but I'm going to do system control, I think it's daemon reload, because when you change the systemd services, you need to inform it of that. So then we'll do system control status on our new service minikube, and it says it's dead, it's disabled, it's not being used. So the first thing we need to do is to re-enable it, or rather enable it. There we go, and that's re-enabled it. Now, what that's done is set it to start up automatically when the system starts up. We've already run minikube manually. I quite like rebooting systems just to get them into a known state before we continue. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do sudo reboot. That has now disconnected me from the target board back on my local computer while the rebooting occurs. So at some point we will be able to go back into that. We just have to wait a little while till it comes up. What I'm going to do is just pause you here until that's back up for us. So that's now come back up, and we can SSH back into the target board, and off we go. Now let's have a look and see with system control if the minikube service is running, and it's failed to start up because it doesn't have the right access to be able to do this. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the best answer to this is, but what I've done is in sudoers, which is the normal users who are allowed to use the sudo command to execute commands as root, I've added a couple of lines in here to make that possible. And one of them is if we add in this line, which allows the Ubuntu user to run minikube, and we also need the SSH command in future as root with no password. Tricks and tips, I discovered through a lot of Googling around and about that this sudo line stops things working. Why? I don't know, but that's the received wisdom. So for now, again, this is probably not as we want it in the future, but to get this up and running, we disable sudo, the sudo group, and then a mistake that I made before was that we also, because we've done that, need to make sure that our Ubuntu user can use the sudo command, or we've locked ourselves out of being able to run commands as root, which was painful. So not a mistake you want to make. So if I save that file, those two lines, as you see, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to reboot, because again, I like to know where I stand with this stuff. So yeah, I just need to sudo reboot. That's rebooting. We'll just pause until we're back up, and then we'll continue. And we're back up again. So let's have a look at the status of minikube. Hopefully that's started up. Now why? Would help if I SSH'd into the right machine. There we go. So we're now onto the target board, and let's see what the status of minikube is. Still failed. Okay, that's strange. Let me investigate. Okay, so what had happened was I'm actually using a different user here for this installation to make it more generic. So I needed to change the user and the group to Ubuntu in this service. So let's do that in the file that I will provide to you. That will be corrected. So let's try to reload that, or rather restart that. And we need to system control daemon reload again because we've changed the files. Let's do that and restart minikube. Things seem to be happening, which I think is good. What it should be doing now is doing all of that setup that you saw when we ran it manually on the command line before. So that's completed, and if we now look at the status of minikube, fantastic, we're up and running. We're up and running, so that's great. So kube control will now work, and we are now running our Kubernetes framework, whatever the word for that would be. And what that means is that we're now able to go and look at actually deploying our hubs CE. So very, very good news. Took a little bit of getting to, didn't it? But we're able to do that now. So this is where the interesting things start to happen. So what we're going to do is we've done, if you remember, the gen-ssl, which generated hcce.yaml that I showed you. And we're now going to do npm run apply. And that is going to go and try and deploy all these deployments and our pods. And it tries to wait and see until the pods have been set up. And I've been through this loop quite a number of times. So let's run it now and let's see what happens. If I go back to our command line, we're in our home directory, if you like. So we're going to go back into Hubs Cloud. We're going to go back into the Community Edition, and we're going to try and do npm run apply. This does lots of setup. All of these pods, I think we call them, are components of the overall Mozilla Hubs or Hub C nowadays framework. We've got Coturn, Dialog, HA Proxy, Hubs, NearSpark, PC Bouncer. One of the big ones is Reticulum. That seems to do a lot of the work. And as these are now being set up as we go along through Kubernetes, and what you can sort of see it's expecting to happen is that as each of them starts up, it knows that they've started and it says, I'm continuing to wait for the other ones. And it can take a couple of minutes. I've sometimes found that it sort of seems to get a bit confused and it sort of carries on waiting. Now, what's being displayed here isn't the startups process, if you like. That's happening in parallel. This is just waiting for that. So if you just exit Control-C out of this, it won't stop it starting up. So don't worry about that. So if you want to exit out of that, you absolutely can. And I have many times. So this is doing lots and lots of setup. You can see that this seems to be proceeding quite well. And we will end up with a set of pods that are all up and running. And I will use the kube control command to show you that is the case, touch wood. Originally, when I started trying to do this, I was trying to do it on an ARM64 platform. And what you find with that is that the pods, they don't start up because they're not supported on ARM64. I'm hoping that we can do something about that in future, and I have some ideas. But right now we're just waiting for these AMD64 pods to start up. And when we've done that, we're then going to get into taking a look at how we can generate the certificates for access to our new instance of Hub CE. I'll go through this in a sec, but there's a couple of different ways. There's a recommended way to run another pod to do this. That didn't work for me. I'm not entirely sure why, but I'm going to take you through how I did it. You may well need to go and research a little bit on using Let's Encrypt to generate certificates if that's not something that you've done before, because the ins and outs of that are a little bit outside of the scope of what I'm trying to achieve here. So that started up. Now, if we run kube control, get pods, that tells us nothing is there. And that's because the namespace that this is set up in is the HCCE namespace, which goes to the hcce.yaml, I imagine. So if we use that namespace, you can see that we've got all of these pods up and running, which is really, really, really good. If you run into trouble, it's really useful to know what's going on inside one of these pods, one of these containers. And you can do that by, if you look at the name of these, each time you sort of recreate these pods, those extensions on those names will change. I think they stay the same across a reboot. So if you look at the name, and if you want to know, say we want to know what's happening with reticulum, you do kube control logs reticulum. Now if you do that as is, it won't work because you need to set the namespace with -n HCCE, and then it tells you what's going on. Those are the logs from inside that pod. And if you want to leave that running and carry on watching what's going on to do some debugging, there's a -f flag for follow, which lets you just sort of sit there and look at what's going on. And, you know, to the extent that I know anything about this, that looks pretty good. I think that's what's supposed to be happening. Now, at this point in time, what was confusing for me was that I couldn't seem to get access to the web server on the board. And as I've mentioned earlier, one of the big problems was that on cloud installations, certainly on Oracle's cloud installation, there was an IP tables persistent package that was locking down ports, which was not obvious. And so that has been removed. Now, it's not on this local standard Ubuntu image I've installed, but if you run into trouble, it's worth looking for that. Now, in a system that is going to be made available to anybody, you probably want to look at firewalling and making sure that you've locked down to the ports that you need. There is some documentation around on using the UFW firewall for that, but I'm not going to go through that at the minute. Now, mainly because I find it is much more straightforward if I have local access to my system and I know that the firewall isn't causing problems, because then I know that the problem lies elsewhere. Now, the other aspect of this is that minikube does not sort of bridge these pods to the external IP address of the board by default, and you have to do something else to enable that, which is to run the minikube tunnel command. So we're going to come back to that, and we're going to set that up, and we're going to make that run as a service like we did with minikube. So what we get effectively is on startup, minikube runs up, all of our installed pods run up, or deployed pods run up, our tunnel runs up that links these to the rest of our network, and then off we go. However, before we do that, what we need to do is to go and look at creating these certificates. So I'm just going to get set up for that, and then we will continue. So now we're going to have a look at using the Let's Encrypt cert bot to create 4 certificates for our hubs instance. Again, you can call this stuff whatever you want, but I've decided to use, if you can see here, yeah, hubs, and then you need, this is in the documentation from hubs CE. I mean, in fact, let me just show you, the documentation is telling us here, on your DNS service, create 4A records to route your domains to the external IP address of your load balancer. Well, now we're going through an intermediate layer here at the minute, because we're going to talk about load balancing on the board. That's on my internal network, and that's being exposed through my access point to the wider internet. So there's an external IP address that's, me on the internet, as it were. And what I've done is I've created these A records, as you can see, to point to that IP address. So that will be your external IP address. And that prefix is the domain. So for this, we're using dynamicdevices.co.uk. So we've got hubs.dynamicdevices.co.uk, and then we've got the other 3. And don't forget to include hubs in those too. So assets.hubs, cause.hubs, and stream.hubs. Now, what you're looking at is a portal within Cloudflare, because I use Cloudflare to manage sites and domains. It's I think it's very good. You may use Cloudflare, you may use something else, but essentially you need to get into your DNS management and you need to create these A records pointing to your public IP address. Now, if your box is directly on the internet, that will be the internet facing port on the box. As I say, in my case, it's not, but hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Now, the next thing is that when we use Let's Encrypt, there's a couple of different ways that you can get certificates for websites through Let's Encrypt. It's beyond the scope to go into using Let's Encrypt in detail, but in essence, you have to prove to Let's Encrypt that you own the domain you're trying to get a certificate for. That's kind of the point, yeah? And there's a couple of different ways of doing that. The older way is you run up the automation tool certbot on your computer and you tell it what domain you want a certificate for, and then it runs up its own little web server, and Let's Encrypt tries to connect to that web server on that domain, and they have a little chat. And if it can do that, then it knows that you control the domain and it will issue the certificate for you. That can be problematic because that doesn't always work terribly well depending on your situation. So there's another way of doing things now, and certbot has a set of plugins for the various different domain name DNS management platforms so that it can talk to the platform. And what it does is, to take an example, if I add in the Cloudflare plugin for certbot, then I get an access token to Cloudflare and I tell certbot about that, and then when I run certbot, it goes and talks to Cloudflare and it puts some specific values into the DNS records that are there, and then Let's Encrypt checks for those and sees that they're there and then knows that I'm in control of the domain, because that couldn't happen unless I was in control of the domain. So that's a good way of doing things when you don't have direct access for them to connect to a web server, a noddy web server that you're running locally. And that's what I'm doing. So if you're not going to do that, you're going to have to work out how to get certbot to run up a local web server or connect to your own DNS management platform. And I'm more than happy to talk to you about that, but we don't have the time to be going through all those permutations here. So we're going to do it this way, and hopefully this makes some sense. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to turn on the terminal again. I can't remember all the commands for this, so it's probably going to take me a few attempts to sort things out. So firstly, we'll do an apt install of certbot. Which is there, that's in, and we've now got certbot. There we go. Let's run certbot as root just to get it going. And it says I don't know anything about web servers. I don't know how to do all these kinds of things. There's a bunch of different ways of running certbot. Then what we're going to do is go and find some documentation. And we're going to have a look at certbot, DNS Cloudflare, read the docs. How do we do things with certbot? There was something in here somewhere or other about how we install certbot in the first place. Doesn't seem to be there. That's not terribly helpful. Certbot Cloudflare plugin. Let's see if that tells us what we need to know. Okay. There we go. This is saying to install Python 3 pip and then use pip install certbot. That runs into trouble on newer installations of Ubuntu, as it gets very upset if you try to directly install Python support with pip. So I think what I needed to do was, firstly, we do need to install Python 3 pip. So let's do that. And then I need to work out what is the package to be installed for the Cloudflare support that I need. And it's not that. So let's see, cert.dns Cloudflare maybe. Hooray, okay, so it was Python 3 certbot DNS Cloudflare. So now we've got certbot and we've got this Cloudflare support. Next thing is we've got to tell certbot about the API key to be able to make the changes that it needs to make. So we're going to go in and we're going to find out where those API keys are, if I can remember. I think it was in profile. API tokens. And I'm going to create a token to edit zone DNS for a specific zone, which is my domain. And I'm going to continue with that token and create it. And then we're going to check that that has actually worked. So let's do that. If I re-enable the terminal, token is valid and active. Very good. So now we will grab the token. Oops. Copy that. And what I'm going to do is put that in a settings file. That's the token, and we need to use a particular way of configuring this up. So we go back to that page I was showing you earlier on, where we've got the certbot DNS Cloudflare's documentation, and we need to put the format in the way that it's described here. And hey presto, so we've now got the file that we need with the token that we need in it. Again, playing somewhat fast and loose with the security of all of this stuff. By the time you see this, that token will be gone. And the next thing is we need to use the appropriate command to generate these certificates. So let me show you. That is further down on this page that we're looking at. And certbot cert only, we're going to use Cloudflare DNS. Here are the credentials that we've just created. And this D is for a domain. So we're going to do that with the 4 domains that we need to create for. You may be able to do all of this at once. I'm going to do it piecemeal to demonstrate how we do things. And if I bring the terminal back up and I then enter that command, and I have a delivery, so just wait 1 second. Okay, so whereabouts were we? We were about to go and try and create a certificate for our domain. So DNS Cloudflare, got the credentials. I need to change those credentials just to use that local file that I've just created. Cert only, Cloudflare for the domain, hubs.dynamicdevices.co.uk. And with a bit of luck, this might actually work. So let's try that. Following certbot.log, let's run it as root. Okay, and it's asking me for some details on the information that should go into the certificate, or actually I tell a lie, that's more to do with Let's Encrypt contacting me for renewals and that type of thing, so I do that. Terms of service, I've been through all of that before. Am I happy to share my email? Yes, happy for that. It gives me a warning that my credentials are unsafe on that file, but that's okay because it's going to be deleted soon. By default, it's made those changes now within Cloudflare, and it's going to check that they've been made, or Let's Encrypt is going to check that they've been made. And it waits a little while for all that to sort of propagate through, and sometimes that's not long enough, and you might need to change it. But that's worked. And it's told me that the certificate's been saved in etc Let's Encrypt Live hubs.dynamicdevices.co.uk. That's the domain. The certificate's in full chain, and the private key is in privkey. So I've done that for that one domain name. And now we're going to do it again for cause.hubs.dynamicdevices.co.uk. Same thing. Now, when I've done this in the past, that 10 seconds failed at this point because it wasn't long enough. And it gave me a message with an option to extend that time. And I then extended it to about 30 seconds, and that seemed to work. So we'll see how that goes. Well, that has gone through, so that's fine. Let me just check out what the other ones are that I need to create. I think one of them is stream, and one of them is assets. So I'm just going to do stream and assets. So let's do that. Stream. And we do another little wait. And then we do assets, and that will get us the 4 certificates that we need. And again, what's going to happen is, anybody out on the internet, they're going to try and connect to hubs.dynamicdevices.co.uk. That's pointing to this box here internally. That's got those certificates on it, and that's how that's all going to get verified. Now, you see there it failed. And this is what I was talking about. Sometimes you need to make it a little bit longer. And it's telling me that I should use DNS Cloudflare propagation seconds. So let's add that in. DNS Cloudflare propagation seconds. I'm going to make it 30 seconds. And we're going to try it again. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that with Cloudflare, I mean, I guess there's a bunch of sort of work that gets done at their end with crypto to generate these certificates. So if you try doing this too many times and fail, they will rate limit you, and they'll say, oh, you've tried too many times, go away for a bit and come back later. So if you're having problems and you're retrying this and you get to a point where, it doesn't seem to be working, just check that they're not responding, telling you that you've been rate limited, because that can be the case. So there we go. So hopefully this is going to go through, and this will be, and it has gone through. Great. And this will all be saved in Let's Encrypt Live. Let's have a look. And we've got 4 folders: assets, cause, hubs, stream. And if we look in the, let's just make ourselves root users. It's a bit easier. If we look in Let's Encrypt in hubs, in there you've got the certificates. You've got the full chain, the certificate itself, private key, etc. So that got me to the point where I had certificates that I need to be able to actually sort of run all these components that we've set up with minikube, kube control, the npm apply. As I say, there's a way in the documentation of using a Kubernetes certbot container to do all of this, which I wasn't able to get going. And I mean, if you can get it going, great, you know, that's a better way of doing it. But because I'm doing this in a more manual way, what I needed to do was to work out how to get these certificates that Let's Encrypt has stored in files into the Kubernetes system so that it knows what's going on. And so I waded through some of the scripting, the code inside hub.ce to work out what happens. And what it does is it apparently within Kubernetes, you can create TLS server keys, which are the sort of Kubernetes secrets. They're the version of the certificates that are going to be deployed. And hub.ce expects 4 keys to be available. And it sets those up automatically if you run the cert bot and you're successful with that, which I wasn't. So what I did was I went off and I looked at what we do to create these certificates. And I just need to try and remember what the command was. And I think it's along the lines of kube control create a secret, which is a TLS secret, and we have to give that a name. Now, the name that hub.ce expects for these certificates is prefixed with cert hyphen and then the domain. So cert hyphen.hubs.dynamicdevices.co.uk in this instance. And we're gonna put the path to the certificate file, cert equals etc let's encrypt. And we're going to continue with this, but this isn't going to work because as the non-root user, we don't have access to those certificates. I could change all the permissions around, which would probably be more appropriate. But for now, just because I'm trying to work through this with you, I'm running as a root user, and we go into the Let's Encrypt folder, and we go into live, we go into the hubs.dynamic devices domain. That's what we're creating the secret for. And we need to give it the certificate, which is a cert file, cert.pem. And then we need to give it the private key. So it's more or less the same path, live, and hubs.dynamic devices. And then the priv key, so it's privkey.pem. And then, very important, remember when we looked at the running pods, you couldn't see any because we were in the wrong namespace or wrong domain or whatever they call it. So we need to set that too. So the namespace is HCCE. So let's try that. Okay, so just restarting here. What we're trying to do is to create the secret TLS keys that we need, TLS secrets that we need. And I'm sort of going back through the loop that I went through last time in this. What we need to do this is to copy over the Let's Encrypt keys that we created out of the archive folder. So what we're going to do is copy etc Let's Encrypt archive. That's got our certificates stored in it. The live folder actually links to that. And I'm going to copy all of that to here, which is our Ubuntu home folder. And then we're going to own everything recursing down through that tree as Ubuntu, so that Ubuntu can access it. And archive is owned by Ubuntu, so that's good. And if we look in archive, we can see that the files are there. In hubs, we can see our certs are in there. That's interesting. It says cert1. So what we're going to do is then we're going to go back. We constructed the secret, the kube control create secret line, which is kube control create secret TLS cert -hubs.dynamic devices, and the cert itself is in our archive folder. Let's give it the full path. Hubs.dynamic. Okay, Okay, and we're going to give it the cert. The name of the cert is cert1.pem, not cert for some reason. I'm going to give it the key, which is again home.to.archive.hubs devices.co.uk, and that is in priv key1.pem. And then we're going to not forget to put the namespace in, which is HCCE. So let's try that. And that actually worked. So that's very good. So we've done that for cert hubs. I think that we can do kube control list secret maybe. Let's try secrets, list secrets. I don't know. Maybe get secrets. Is that going to work? Yep, and that's because we need to add in the, there we go. So we've added in that cert hubs secret, which is great. And now what we need to do is to do the same thing for the other three. So we're going to call it cert cause.hubs. Don't forget that you still need that whole hubs in there in terms of the way I'm doing things. I'm going to assume it's the cert1 name in there. And we're going to do cause.hubs there. So cert cause.hubs with the cause.hubs cert and the cause.hubs key. And that worked as well. So that's great. We're on a roll. So now let's do the next one for cert stream. I think it's stream. Yeah, cert stream, which is stream.hubs and stream.hubs. And I think that's right. So let's do that. That's worked as well. And then the last one, we want assets.hubs, assets.hubs, and assets.hubs. Phew. So now we've created all of the certificate secrets that are expected by the pods. And if we go back to kube control and have a look at what's going on, those pods are all running. So that's pretty good. Then last bit is if we look at the load balancer, that's not running. So I've just done kube control get service, which gets me the, I might actually need the namespace in there. Yeah, so if I put the namespace in, it's giving me a load of information about all the ports that are supposed to be accessible and where from and so on and so forth. And what's really important here is if you look at LB or the load balancer, it's saying that the external IP is pending, i.e. not there, not hooked up. And from my reading, what's going on here is that if you are running all of this in a sort of Kubernetes hosted environment, then what's happening is that's being managed by the hosting environment, and it's not being managed for us here. Now, luckily, we have an answer, and the answer is to run minikube tunnel. And we also may need to tell minikube tunnel which address it should bind to, so it binds to the right place. Now, again, as I said earlier, I want this running automatically. I don't have to do this every time I start things up. So I'm going to create another service, et systemd system minikube, but I'm going to call it minikube tunnel.service. And in the finest traditions again, I have an example of another service that I created to do this, which I'm going to drop in here. And in particular, you can see I don't want this running until after let me do that again. I don't want this running until after minikube has started up. So we wait for that. And in here as well, I'm binding to my specific IP address of my board. Now that's dynamically assigned, and that might change, and that would all cause mayhem. I had trouble trying to get it to bind to every address. So that kind of needs to be looked at in the future, but it is what it is for now. And also, as I should have done before, what I need this to do is to run as the Ubuntu user. And I've already made the changes that I made earlier on to sudoers, so we should have access to be able to do the things that need to be done. That also is probably something that needs to be more secure. And if I save that and I do system control daemon reload, going to run that as root, that ran, and then I'm going to do system control. We'll look at the status of minikube tunnel, which should be disabled, and it is. And then we're going to try and enable it, and it's enabled. And then we're going to look at the status again, and it's enabled, but it's not started, which it would do if we rebooted at this point. But let's have a look, and it is up and running. So that's very good. Now, if we go back to where we did that kube control get service, the load balancer has an external IP address. I don't quite understand that. I think probably what's happened is the load balancer has been given its internal host-only IP address, and minikube tunnel is tunneling that through to the external port. I think that's what's going on, but who knows. So in theory, what we've now got is we've got Ubuntu installed. We've got Kubernetes installed through minikube. We've got kube control. We've created we've deployed our pods. We've created certificates for the pods and those secrets that we needed within Kubernetes. And we've got minikube and the minikube tunneling up and running automatically on startup. So now what I want to do is to reboot the target board. And we'll take a little bit of a break for a moment while it comes up, and then we'll see if any of this has worked. We're back up and running again. And what we're going to do is SSH into our Ubuntu. And we're going to have a look and see if our pods are running up. Now, remember, kube control wouldn't work if minikube is running, and we know it is. The service is working, so that's all up and running. That's good. We're going to have a look and check for the services. And you see we've got an external IP address, so the minikube tunnel service is running as well. We can double check all that stuff if we don't believe it by running system control status minikube. That's okay. Minikube tunnel, and that's okay too. Happy. You see it's bound to the IP address there. Now, it all takes a little while for this to come up. If you try and connect to your domain immediately, you'll probably get a connection refused. If you try and connect to your domain within a minute, maybe a minute or two, while it's still setting up its load balancer, I think, then you'll get 503 service unavailable, which if I you may not be able to see that because I've got this in front, haven't I? But if I get rid of that temporarily, you've got service unavailable. But if you then wait a little bit and give it another go, look at that. Look at that. How fantastic. So we now have Hubs CE up and running. Really, really good. It still thinks I'm signed in as a previous user for some reason. I don't know why that is, but I'm just going to refresh. And then essentially what you can do is you can add in your user email. You will recall that I used an admin user email when I started all of this off. And that's probably the thing to do, because you can add another user, but they won't be an admin and you won't be able to get into the other bits. I still haven't worked out why I'm missing some icons here. I think that's to do with admin setup where you upload these things. It seems to, I think it relies on having some content available from hubs.mozilla, which is no longer available. So, that's kind of the next step. That's the next thing to negotiate. But you can see that's up and running here. Now, there is a way. So when you enter your admin details, you are supposed to receive an email, and you can click a link in the email which will verify you with an authentication code. And if you can get that authentication code out of the logs, you can construct that yourself without needing the actual emails to be set up, if you see what I mean. But that's all a bit fiddly, and I would like people to be able to join these servers without a lot of faff. So it's better if we can get the emails up and running. Now, if I go back to what helped me, is I was able to look at the logs for one of the pods to work out what was going on. And I think that the one that we need is reticulum. So I'm going to do get kube control logs for reticulum for the namespace, and there you go. So that's up and running, and we're going to follow that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just try and send an email, and here you see it's trying to do that. And if you haven't made the change that I made way back when to enable SSL and disable TLS, it will wait a bit and then you will get an error there. But in actual fact, what I've received is a sign-in link. So let me see if I can just add in some screen capture to show you this email that I've just received, which is in my email client. So let's do that. I think you should be able to see that now. And there you go. There you go. So that's gone through Gmail and it's emailed me my sign-in link. And I'm going to go and I'm going to click on that sign-in link. Let me take the terminal down. You see, after I clicked before, it said it had sent that email to me. That's what came through. So let me now go and click on that link. Verifying email, verification complete. Brilliant. I'm in. So it wants me to close the window, etc., etc. What I'm going to do is just sort of retype hubs.dynamicdevices. That will take me through. I'm signed in as AJ Lennon at Gmail. I can create a room. Now, I don't really know how all of this works from here on in. I'm very much learning as I go along. But it's creating rooms. I can join the room. I can join it on a headset. I can add people. We've had people in rooms. I'm going to leave that for now. A couple of other things to look at is if you go directly into the admin section, this is where you can start to play with adding in logos. I think that might be what's missing. You can get more avatar and scene packs. This is currently a work in progress. If you try and do this, it will fail, because if I just checking that you can still see what I'm doing. If I try and get one of these packs, I can go to import content, I can put the pack there, and it won't work. And that's because if I actually go and look at what that pack is just a set of URLs pointing to content, but those URLs are all on hubs.mozilla. And if you go there now, they've all gone. And it just redirects you to the end of support message. And that, I think, is why it errors. And again, I don't know what I don't know, but I think that the good people at Hubs Foundation are right in the middle of looking at all of this and updating these packs and sort of replacing this so that it's all available. And what I'm about to learn about, and the other thing I can just say as well is that you can give your links to your friends. They can join up and their accounts will pitch up here and they can come and join you, and you can make people admins if you want. That's why you need to start off with the admin user, or you won't have access to any of this. And then the last little bit here is that you can use this spoke tool to create content, to create your projects. I got some issue with the tutorial popping up with this error, which I think again is related to Mozilla Hubs. This needs looking at. Not quite sure what's going on there, but you know, isn't that interesting? Lots of fun ahead. So there we go. So we've managed to get from installing clean image of an operating system, Ubuntu 24.04. We've got Kubernetes installed on that with minikube. We've created certificates. We've deployed pods for Hubs CE, and we've got it up and running. Clearly, there's more to do, but that took me probably about 10 days, 2 weeks to get through. There are some tricks and tips in here that I've shared with you, which enabled me to get past some of the hurdles. There may very well be a better way of doing this, but this works for me. I wish you very much luck with it. If you manage to get it up and running, please do contact me and let me know, because I would love to know that this has helped you. And if you have any advice on how I can improve this setup, you know, from your own knowledge, I would love to hear it, because I'm just figuring out this stuff as I go along. So thank you for listening. Best of luck in the future.